The summer sun burned over Arlington, but the tomb guard stood unflinching, his boots pounding the stone in a perfect rhythm. 21 steps turn. Pause. Repeat. Nathan Hayes was a statue of discipline, his navy blue uniform soaked with sweat, his eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. The crowd watched in awe, but beyond their murmurs, a sharp voice sliced through the reverence. "Hand over those medals, old man." A group of thugs circled an elderly veteran, their laughter cruel, their hands itching for a fight. Nathan's grip tightened on his rifle. Protocol demanded he stay put, but the veteran's trembling hand on his Purple Heart told a different story. One of sacrifice, honor, and a past worth defending. In that moment, the tomb guard faced a choice that would echo far beyond the sacred ground. Before we dive into the story, where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. And if you believe that values like honor, courage, and sacrifice still matter, join us in keeping their legacy alive. The summer sun beat down on Arlington National Cemetery, its rays glinting off rows of white headstones that stretched across the rolling hills like silent sentinels. It was a sweltering afternoon in July 2025, the air thick with humidity, the faint buzz of cicadas mingling with the soft rustle of the American flag near the tomb of the unknown soldier. Tourists moved along the stone paths, their voices hushed in reverence, their cameras clicking to capture the sacred ground. Children tugged at their parents' hands, pointing at the towering columns of the memorial amphitheater in the distance, while others stood quietly reading inscriptions on the graves. At the center of it all stood Nathan Hayes, a tomb guard, his navy blue uniform. Despite the heat, his kepi hat casting a shadow over his sunglasses. His movements were precise, almost mechanical. 21 steps, a crisp turn, 21 seconds of pause, then 21 steps back. The rhythm was sacred, a tribute to the fallen, a symbol of unwavering duty. Nathan's face was a mask of discipline, but his sharp brown eyes scanned the crowd, missing nothing. At 28, he had served as a tomb guard for 3 years, a role he carried with pride inspired by his father, a Vietnam veteran who had taught him the weight of sacrifice. Near the edge of the plaza, an elderly man stood alone, his frame hunched but his posture proud. Samuel Thompson, or Sam as his friends called him, was 78, his white hair thinning under a faded baseball cap. His old suit jacket, pressed and neat, bore a row of medals that gleamed in the sunlight, a Purple Heart among them, earned in the jungles of Vietnam. Sam leaned heavily on a wooden cane, his eyes fixed on the tomb, lost in memories of friends who never came home. He came here often, not for recognition, but to feel close to those he lost. Nathan noticed Sam immediately. The medals caught his eye, but it was the man's quiet dignity that held his attention. Sam's trembling hands adjusted the lapel of his jacket, as if reassuring himself the medals were still there. Nathan felt a surge of respect. His father had worn similar medals, each one a story of courage, of survival, of loss. But not everyone shared that respect. At the edge of the crowd, 4 men lingered near a low stone wall, their postures out of place among the reverent visitors. They wore hoodies and torn jeans, their voices low but sharp, their eyes fixed on Sam. The leader, Jake Riley, was a hulking figure with a shaved head and a jagged tattoo snaking up his arm. His smirk was cruel, his gaze predatory. Beside him, Mike, a wiry guy with a nervous laugh, nudged Jake, pointing at Sam's medals. Tony, broad-shouldered and silent, cracked his knuckles, while Chris, the youngest, shifted uneasily, his eyes darting to the crowd. Nathan's grip on his rifle tightened. Something about the group set his nerves on edge. They weren't tourists. They weren't here to pay respects. His training told him to stay focused, to maintain his post. But his instincts screamed that trouble was brewing. "Hey, old man," Jake called out, his voice cutting through the hum of the crowd. "Those shiny pins real? Or did you get them at a thrift store?" Sam turned slowly, his expression calm but weary. "They're real," he said, his voice steady, despite the tremor in his hands. "Earned them serving my country." Jake laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "Serving your country? Bet you were just a cook or something, right? Pushing papers in some office." Mike snickered, stepping closer. "Yeah, those medals don't look like much. Probably worth a few bucks, though." He reached out, flicking the Purple Heart with a finger. Sam's hand moved to cover his medals, his voice low but firm. "Don't touch those." Nathan's jaw clenched. The crowd was starting to notice a few tourists pausing, their faces shifting from curiosity to concern. A woman with a stroller hesitated, her phone in hand, while a man whispered to his wife, gesturing toward the scene. Nathan's training held him in place. Protocol forbade him from leaving his post unless the tomb itself was threatened. But watching Sam, vulnerable yet defiant, stirred something deep in him. Jake leaned in, towering over Sam. "What's the matter, Grandpa? Don't like us admiring your little trinkets? Bet there was a pretty penny. Maybe I'll take one as a souvenir." Sam's hand tightened on his cane, his lips pressing into a thin line. "You'll do no such thing," he said, his voice steady, carrying the weight of a man who had faced worse than a bully. Jake smirked, glancing back at his crew. "Watch this," he muttered. With a sudden shove, he pushed Sam's shoulder hard. The old man stumbled his cane, slipping on the stone path. He caught himself barely, but the axe drew gasps from the crowd. A young girl clutched her father's hand, whispering, "Daddy, why are they being mean?" Nathan's heart pounded. Protocol be damned. He couldn't stand by while a veteran was humiliated. His father's voice echoed in his mind. "You don't just honor the fallen by standing still, Nate. You honor them by doing what's right." In a single fluid motion, Nathan broke formation, his polished boots hitting the stone with purpose. The crowd parted their murmurs, growing louder as the unthinkable. A tomb guard was moving. "Step away from him," Nathan commanded, his voice sharp and unwavering. Jake froze, startled by the sudden appearance of the guard. His sneer faltered, but he quickly regained his composure. "You talking to us, soldier boy?" he mocked, stepping closer. Nathan's eyes locked on Jake's, his sunglasses reflecting the man's scowl. "I said, step away now." The crowd fell silent, their attention riveted. A few phones were raised, recording the scene. Jake glanced at his crew, then back at Nathan. "Or what you going to arrest us? Where's the rest of your little statue friends?" Nathan didn't flinch. "I don't need backup to deal with you," he said, his tone calm but laced with steel. The tension was electric. Jake's bravado cracked under Nathan's unshakable presence. Mike, the wiry one, nudged Jake. "Let's go, man. This ain't worth it." But Jake's pride wouldn't let him back down. With a sudden lunge, he reached for Sam's medals, his hand grazing the purple heart. That was the breaking point. Nathan moved like lightning, stepping between Jake and Sam, his gloved hand catching Jake's wrist midair. The force sent a jolt through Jake's arm, and he winced, trying to pull free. Nathan's grip was iron. "Not going to happen," Nathan said, his voice low and firm. He twisted Jake's wrist just enough to force him back the move, precise, controlled. "Let him go," Tony shouted, charging forward. Nathan released Jake's wrist and pivoted, his training kicking in. He sidestepped Tony's wild swing, deflecting the blow with a swift block, then pushed the man's shoulder, sending him stumbling. Mike rushed in next, aiming a sloppy punch at Nathan's side. Nathan dodged with ease, hooking Mike's arm and twisting, forcing him to his knees with a grunt. Chris, the youngest, hesitated, his eyes wide. Jake roared in frustration. "Get him!" he barked. The three men surged forward, but Nathan was a wall of discipline. He moved with precision, sidestepping, deflecting, and delivering control strikes that incapacitated without causing serious harm. Within moments, Jake was sprawled on the ground, clutching his shoulder while Tony and Mike nursed bruises. Chris backed away, hands raised in surrender. "It's over," Nathan said, standing over Jake. "Leave now or face the consequences." Jake glared up at him, his bravado shattered. He muttered a curse, signaling his crew to retreat. The group staggered off, disappearing into the distance as the crowd erupted into soft cheers. A few tourists clapped their admiration clear. A father hoisted his daughter onto his shoulders, whispering, "That's what a hero looks like." Nathan turned to Sam, his expression softening. "Are you all right, sir?" he asked, his tone respectful. Sam nodded, his hands still trembling. "Thanks to you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stepped in." Nathan offered a small smile. "You are safe now, sir. That's all that matters." As the crowd began to disperse, Nathan led Sam to a shaded bench near the plaza. The old man eased himself down, his cane tapping the stone. "They shouldn't have disrespected you like that," Nathan said, his voice carrying an edge of anger. "Those medals represent